much, Shirley. Again, my name is Dr. Melissa McRae. I have basically a functional medicine practice down in Mansfield, Ohio. Functional medicine is really looking at the body as one entire unit, how it all works together, and we're looking at disease prevention and treatment, but really we focus on the prevention platform. So how I actually, just tell you a little bit about myself, how I actually got to this place in my career. I had a traditional practice in Mount Gilead, Ohio for 12 years. I love being my own boss. I love having a primary care practice. I was employed when I first got out of medical school for about 5 years, and you learn a lot from that, and what I learned is I hate being employed. The second thing I learned is I felt like I could just do it better. Now it sounds a little narcissistic, but it's really kind of my control freakishness, I guess. I didn't like people in accounting telling me what to use and what not to use. I didn't like insurance companies telling me, what would be the best way to treat somebody when I felt like we had a lot of ways that we could help people without using medications. But it was really great. I learned how to run a practice. I learned, having a lot of that support. So after I was employed, I had the opportunity to buy my own practice, which I did. And I spent the next 9 years in my own family practice. I love that, but honestly, it came to a point over the last probably 5 years before I switched over. I needed to decide if I was going to stay in primary care or if I was going to become employed again. Because the way the medical market was set up, you can't leave primary care and spend a half an hour with your patient. That doesn't work. So I either need to decide, am I going to pay my staff or am I going to get paid? So what we did, I've always loved preventative medicine. Transitioned, we closed down the primary care office, opened up Vitality, Natural Wellness, and Med Spa. I had been doing a lot of fun laser work and injectables like Botox and fillers and just some fun stuff like that in my regular practice. So it gave me an opportunity to expand on that, but then really open up a practice where I could spend as much time as I wanted with every patient I wanted. Now to do that, I had to be outside of the insurance world. So it's a cash practice, which means you could submit a receipt for insurance. That used to work a lot better than it does now. I think they're finding pretty much every way to deny a bill they can. But what we do work incredibly well with is patients who have high deductible health care plans, people who have bad insurance or no insurance. So that's how our whole transition into a functional medical practice happened. I truly believe that if you give the body the chance to heal itself, it will. And if you give the body what it needs, it will respond. And that's kind of the flip side of what our traditional medical environment is. So that's the background on how we got to be what we are. And we're in downtown Mansfield, one block off the square. If anybody knows where the carousel is, we're just a block up the street from that on Main Street. And we just opened up our second office in Powell, which is also a really, really cool place because functional medicine and prevention is, it's in the cities, it has a lot stronger kind of permeation through things. So it's fun to be able to take things from there and bring them here and vice versa. So what we're going to talk about tonight, it's interesting because when Shirley read off the title, I thought, oh no, that's really not what I'm talking about. So hopefully you'll all get something out of this. It's not quite going to be that. I was like, I wonder where that title came from because I don't think I ever came up with that one. So, but I like it, it's really good. If this doesn't fulfill what you're looking for, maybe I can come back and I'll focus it more on the children. So, what we're going to talk about is a little bit about functional medicine. We're going to try to tie it in so you all know what the differences are between all of this. And if you have questions, please feel free to, pepper me at the end with questions we've got time for that. So, from a functional medicine perspective, the body is ruled by a whole bunch of hormones. And I think when people think hormones, they typically think what we call our sex hormones, like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. But you have so many hormones in your body, and the interplay between them is crucial. It's important that if anything is off, things aren't going to work right. So it's like a bunch of gears finally working together. And if you have things that are not in the right place, then it is not going to run right. So if you picture your car and you have cylinders that aren't firing, just not as well. You know, if you've got 2 flat tires, you can get where you're going, but clearly not as well. And our body works the same way. So you have 50 different hormones, major hormones that operate our body, and they all serve multiple functions. They turn a lot of things on, they turn a lot of things off. Functional medicine is really the full belief that the body is capable of self-regulation and maintenance. So these hormones, if we're thinking kind of like a hormone perspective, they're all messengers, and what they do is they turn things on and off. So it's kind of like Legos and how Legos fit together perfectly. And when you're working with, so we'll use the example of a lock. You have the right hormones that will go into a receptor, and they will turn things on and they will turn things off. So when you think about vitamin D, and we all know, oh, we need vitamin D for bones, but if you keep your vitamin D levels above 60, people notice an improvement in their mood. You'll have a decreased risk of breast cancer, you'll have a decreased risk of colon cancer, and Alzheimer's. So we know that vitamin D deficiency does not cause breast cancer. But clearly it has a very important role. I've never seen a female with breast cancer who has a normal vitamin D. So again, it's not necessarily causative, but we know it turns things on and off, and we know it has a really important value in protecting things. And then we have the bioidentical versus non-bioidentical. So bioidentical hormones look exactly like yours. Atom for atom, they're exactly the same. They're made in a lab, typically from plants. So it's a lab-based, completely identical molecule. Non-bioidentical hormones, when we're talking about typically the sex hormones, non-bioidenticals mean they're typically taken from another animal and then they're used. So the most common one that everybody knows about is like Premarin. Premarin comes from a horse, and there's 40 different types of estrogen, even though a human only has 4. So you think about those 40 and they get into your body, and those other 36 are turning things on and off that maybe aren't supposed to. So that's how we really look at, again, give the body what it knows, and it's going to do the right thing. So hormones, what are they? Again, they're just chemicals that really turn things on and off, and they're crucial in metabolic pathways. Where do they come from? All over the place. Your thyroid gland makes hormones, your pituitary gland makes hormones, your kidneys, your adrenal glands, your ovaries, your testicles, they all make hormones. So if you're a female, you might have heard somebody when after they get their tubes tied, all of a sudden their menstrual cycles get a little crazy. So we know that there are all sorts of parts of your body that make hormones, and having that adjustment is perfect. How do you check them? Lots of different ways. Blood tests are probably the most common. Urine tests are very, very specific. There's saliva tests. There's all different ways to test hormones, but typically we think of blood tests. So we have this interplay of hormones, and we talk kind of flippantly about cylinders in a car firing right, or gears working together. But this is just a piece of one hormone pathway. So it's crucial that we have a really, really good understanding of what happens in hormones and have them working properly. So signs of hormone imbalance, and these are things that we see all the time. The problem with when people typically come to me, they typically come and they say, I don't feel well, but my doctor tells me I'm fine. And the problem is a lot of times the physical exam has kind of been lost in medicine. A lot of times we'll have normal blood work, and it says, look, my blood work was normal. Sometimes all the blood work isn't checked maybe to the depth we needed to be checked. And the other thing is when they judge what a normal range is on blood work, they take a very large segment of the population, they take the middle 80% bell curve, and that's normal. So, if you have somebody who gets a C- on a test, do they pass? Right. If you have, the one funny joke from medical school was when you call the person who gets a D- on their boards, doctor. Right. So, we don't necessarily want to be in the normal range. We want to be ideal, right? Going out to eat twice a week for fast food is normal. It is far from ideal. So we look at lab work the exact same way. We want to have ideal placements for a lot of the crucial hormones and lab values. If those aren't ideal, you're not going to feel as well. So a lot of times people come in, I don't feel well. That could be a whole lot of things. So we start by basically checking in an extensive panel to see where their main values are. So fatigue, mood swings, irritability, weight gain, muscle loss, brain fog, insomnia, poor endurance, no sex drive, acne, aching joints, and such. So just raise your hand if you relate to any of those. Plus, I get you at the end of the day. So, you know, it's pretty non-specific, and we have to dig a little deeper. We pretty much covered this one before. The one thing I guess I would focus on is everything should be very individualized in your healthcare. So we all know that one dose of something doesn't necessarily match everybody's body. So getting exact measurements, and you know, it's not cookie cutter medicine. It feels like cookie cutter medicine in our world right now, but we have to remember that everything is so individualized, and it's really important that we get everything just right for you. Certainly not one size fits all. So we think about just menopause for a minute. 3,500 women enter menopause daily, and you think, well, how can you say that? Because it feels like, you know, menopause is just this ongoing thing forever and ever. Menopause is just if a female has not had a cycle in a year. So that's the definition of menopause. But symptoms begin up to 15 years earlier. So if the average age is 52 and a half, then we know around age 37, women can start feeling like, you know, brain fog. Oh no, that's just baby brain that lasts forever. You know, fatigue. Oh, that's just because we're running around and we're working and we're cleaning and we're doing whatever we have to do. So, you know, a lot of things kind of get grouped into it, but what we see is across the board, there's a key number of a group of hormones that tend to drop off. The whole getting over, getting through, it doesn't really happen because metabolically there's a whole lot happening inside of you that changes, and so knowing how it affects you is important. So then we also have andropause. Andropause we laugh about is the male menopause. You know, a lot of people are seeing lots about low T. So testosterone is really, really fascinating. Testosterone is your feel-good hormone, your sense of well-being and calmness. A lot of people think it's like rage kind of thing, like roid rage, and that's way totally different spectrum of things. So physiologic testosterone is good sleep, brain clarity, mental clarity, easy concentration, energy, maintaining muscle mass. So those are the biggies that we look for testosterone. So normally, men should have their testosterone levels when they're about 25, between 900 and 1,100. That's normal. We can get 60-year-olds in the practice who grew up more in the country, eating just regular food. They maybe still live like that, and their testosterone levels in their 60s will still be around 500 or 600. And then we see these young guys, like 25, come in and say, I can't work out like I want to. And so you check their testosterone, and their testosterone might be 200. And right now, they should be like 600 to 1,100, and they're way down there. What we find is there are called endocrine disruptors, and endocrine disruptors are chemicals in our environment that will just kill your hormones. They'll just kill them. So, you know, I call it like the Tupperware generation. Plastics, you're stored in plastics, you microwave in plastic. You know, we have microwaved everything in plastic, and we microwaved everything. So, kind of all these different things. As of 2013, there were over 15,000 chemicals that were cleared by the Food and Drug Administration for use in food that had never been tested before. So we just have all this exposure to stuff that's really not good for us. So paying very close attention to what you put in your body is really, really important. Okay, so let's just look at an example of men. So when we talk about optimizing things, and we talk about just optimizing testosterone as an example, we try to get men between 900 and 1,100 on a regular basis. That's kind of their sweet spot. It's the range they should be at around age 25. And why we pick 25, it's after puberty, but it's before things start to taper off. It's the point in their life where they're going to typically be the healthiest, where they have the least amount of heart disease, least amount of prostate cancer, least amount of colon cancer. It's really this nice place. So we're looking between 900 and 1100. I'll have men come into me and they'll say they went to their doctor and they tested their testosterone and it was fine. And their testosterone might be 250. So clearly the only thing that they're barely not having is erectile dysfunction at that point. So 250 is not normal. You know, if you're going to look for trying to prevent all of these things, down here is not cutting it. So it's so interesting. As an example of where kind of medical mindset is right now, I had a patient I sent to a neurologist. Their B12 level was great, right where we wanted it. The neurologist checked their labs and said, wow, that B12 level was too high. You don't get B12 toxicity, trust me. And then we had another patient who went, and the B12 level was like 150. Normal B12 should be 900 to 1,000. B12 was down around 150, and then all of a sudden it was this emergency of, oh my gosh, we need to give B12. What happened to the people who are in between that area? You want to catch them before they have the neurologic issues. So again, what we focus on is get everybody to the ideal place before they crash and get to the bottom where they have all these issues coming. So it's very, very important to keep your levels ideal so we can prevent a lot of these things. When you talk about breast cancer and hormones, certainly the studies that we have on bioidentical estrogen and testosterone and hormones is there is absolutely no increased incidence. Bioidentical. Synthetic, absolutely. You know, that's why we can only use it for 5 years. So bioidenticals we can use for a long, 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 long time. It's been the gold standard of therapy in Australia, Europe, and Asia since the 1930s. So we're a little behind in what we're doing. Testosterone in particular is fascinating for breast cancer. There's there's one lady that I work with down in Dayton. She's a general surgeon who does mostly breast cancer surgery. And what she'll do is, if someone comes in, if a female comes in with a lump that's breast cancer, she will put a little pellet of testosterone at the side of the breast cancer lesion, shrink it by 80% before she surgically removes it. So there's some really fascinating information on hormones. I found most of this out when I decided to just stop doing what insurance told me to do, and like something didn't feel right about that. You know, so being able to dig into, give me all the studies on this, give me all the studies on the thyroid, give me all the studies, and I could just kind of dig in. I really don't, a lot of practitioners who don't do a lot of work with bioidentical hormones. Honestly, I'm kind of neutral about how I feel. I feel bad for them, for one, because they don't honestly have time to dig into this stuff, and I feel like a confused person always says no. So most practitioners are so busy doing regulatory things, asking you if you have a gun in your house, asking you if you thought about suicide in the past year, asking you if you wear your seatbelt. They don't have time to go and dig into information and find out what are the best ways to help people. So it's kind of a weird place in medicine right now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about weight loss. Weight loss is something that people frequently come to us for, and it's so multifactorial, it's hard to just say, you know, the one little thing's going to do it. Certainly we know that diet and exercise play a huge role, but we're learning that diet is crucial in a number of different ways. So gut health is extremely important. I think probably everyone in this room could say they know somebody who has chronic GI symptoms and they get a checkout and they're told it's fine. So whether it's bloatedness or gassiness or changes in their bowels. So we know that gut health is crucial. We're seeing more and more kids with belly issues, and exams are normal. So to say normal. But what we're finding is they have increased permeability in their guts. So their guts are supposed to, you know, your intestines are supposed to have this nice shiny cover on it, kind of like a hot dog, where you could get stuff in it inside and outside of a hot dog membrane, but it's kind of hard. That's what your gut wall is supposed to be like. And what's happening because of mostly the different foods and things we're putting in us, that's getting kind of spongy. And so things that are supposed to stay on the inside are leaking out, and things that are on the outside are leaking in. Causes a chronic inflammation of the belly and causes belly pain. So the cool thing is we can work through all of that through diet, but traditionally it's, you're not going to find a lot of things besides just trying to take some medicine for it. So we can fix all that. All right, so the biggest blockers we have right now, sluggish thyroid. Again, we're looking at ideal. There's so many women who come in and they're like, I swear I have a thyroid problem, but they tell me it's fine. And honestly, if we're looking at the ideal levels, I'm going to teach you 3 different things about the thyroid and how to look at those values. So I'm kind of an analogy girl, so I'm going to give you a little analogy and you have to bear with me. So when we're talking about the thyroid and how it works, think of your body as a factory. So your body's this factory, and every cellular response is another line where production happens. So you have all these little conveyor belts and have enzyme pathways. So your factory, you have all these different lines happening. Well, your thyroid is right here, and your thyroid is kind of like it provides the workers for everything that happens in your body. Now your thyroid gland puts out 2 different kinds of workers. You have T3, which is your really great worker. This is in your factory, the kind of worker that you want every single person to be. So they put in like 10-hour days and 8 hours and never take a break. They just work. That's T3. Super important. It is crucial to have T3 normal. Because just like your factory, like if you had a real factory and you didn't have very many good workers, your production would be kind of down, right? Okay. Then you have another type of employee that works these lines. That comes from the thyroid gland. It's called T4. T4 is your wimpy employee. They're your weak one. Like if anybody has a business there, you're a C employee. Right? So they take lots of breaks. They don't show up sometimes. They work sometimes, but at least they're there sometimes, right? So they're not so good, but at least they're there. Because if they weren't there, then you would have total gaps in production, and your factory would definitely not run it. So your T3, thyroid hormones, super important. Your T4, it's good, it's important, just not great. Okay, now we have another type of employee, and this is the one that everybody hates. And this is the hormone that looks busy, running around the factory floor, and never does anything. So reverse T3 is that hormone. It's completely inactive. So those are the 3 types of thyroid hormone that play in your system to kind of manage things. Now, how many of you have ever had your thyroid checked and they just checked TSH? Okay, so TSH, let's talk about that. TSH is the boss. TSH is from the brain. So in your factory, think of the boss on the 2nd floor, really far away from the factory floor, with big glass-fronted window, so she can't hear anything. All she sees is activity. Okay, so that's what TSH tells you. TSH is kind of an overall look at the amount of thyroid hormone in your body, but you don't know if it's the good stuff, the bad stuff, or the inactive stuff. So it's really, really important to when you're checking the thyroid to measure those players, or else you're never going to get a good idea. So from a sluggish thyroid perspective, if your T3 is not ideal, you're not going to feel well. Your thyroid either turns things up or turns things down. So when we say turn things down, if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, everything in your body slows. So some people might get constipation, some people might get tired, some people might notice their hair is not growing as fast. Some people know it's hard to get out of bed. Now there's different versions, if you're just a little bit off, it's non-specific. Some people come in and they're like, I cannot function. So when you're talking about correcting the thyroid, there's a few things that have to happen. Your body has to have zinc, selenium, iodine, and magnesium to make thyroid hormone. If it doesn't have that, it won't make any employees, right? It won't make any T3, T4. So it's really, really crucial. So what we have to determine when somebody's thyroid is off is it because they're not getting enough of the nutrients, which I think we all would say that our food is not nearly as nutrient-dense as it used to be. Or are they taking it in and they're just not being absorbed? So we have the person who has a bad thyroid who also complains of all these gut issues. So there's a very good chance they might be taking it in, but it's just not going anywhere. And then we have the other people who have something like Hashimoto's or Graves' disease. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, so Hashimoto's and Graves' is an autoimmune issue. So your body is basically picking on your thyroid all day long, and it's really hard to regulate because it's constantly being picked on. It's an autoimmune process. So autoimmune issues, typically 90% of those antibodies come from your gut. So they almost always have gut issues. So it's always fascinating to see how everything plays in together. So we look at all those different factors to determine how do we help your thyroid. If it's just mostly they don't have any gut issues, but their levels are low, then we actually supplement them with some zinc, selenium, magnesium, and iodine, and we start seeing their thyroid get back to normal. So we have a lot of different ways of looking at that. Hormone imbalance. These are, if we're talking about our sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. If people are talking about weight loss in particular, if you have no testosterone or very low testosterone, your body really isn't getting any kind of signal that it should keep muscle mass. And we're not talking about being a bodybuilder, we're just talking about the signal for your body to favor muscle over fat. So if we have very low testosterone, your body's not saying, hey, we should pay attention to the muscle. All it's saying is we are totally cool with that. And if that's the case, you're not going to burn fat preferentially. So just getting those ratios normal again, people's bodies start doing what they're supposed to do and they start losing weight. Food sensitivities, this probably 20 years ago, 10 years ago, wasn't nearly an issue like it is now. We honestly eat so much crap that we put in us that we can't be surprised that our bodies are not supposed to recognize this. And if you put it in you over and over and over, we can't be too surprised when it starts reacting to that stuff. So it's kind of like, is anybody in here allergic to latex? So latex allergies we see, we're seeing more and more and more of, and it's just there's so much latex exposure. It's something that's foreign to our bodies, and when you repeatedly expose yourself to it, your body will start to make reactions against it, and that's what we see. For weight loss, check your medicine cabinet. Holy smokes, we take a lot of things that make weight a whole lot harder to lose. Certain blood pressure medications, antidepressant medications, lots of different hormones, so birth control pills in a younger person, they'll just drop all your hormones like flat on them. And then they wonder why, things are changing. Antidepressants, totally known to do that. Completely will mess up your hormone panel. So your mood might be better, but everything else is worse. So it's kind of fascinating. And poor sleep. If your body is not getting the sleep it needs, anybody familiar with your adrenal glands? Adrenal glands are these little itty bitty things that sit on top of your kidneys, and they're your stress hormone glands. So what they do is they pump out a steroid under times of high stress that allow you to get through things. So if any of you have ever had prednisone for maybe poison ivy or a bad respiratory problem, the steroids can kind of make you jittery and feel anxious. And well, these little adrenal glands pump out steroid to give people this extra energy. So if somebody's been through a really bad situation, maybe a life stressor, taking care of ill parents or anything like that, and then they look back on it and say, how in the world did I get through that? Your adrenal glands. These little guys cranking out steroids all the time. Well, the problem is steroids cause most people gain weight, so a lot of people get like that mid-weight around them. The other thing that happens is after a long period of time, the adrenal glands kind of tucker out and they say, we're done, we can't do that anymore. That's the day that people say they hit their wall. Hit their wall, I just can't function anymore. Sleep is one of those things that keeps your adrenal glands recharged so that your body can do what it's supposed to do and continue to compensate. We talked about that one. Oh, this is just a huge list of medicines and kind of all the interesting things that they do. It's fun because my practice, our goal is to get people off of medicine. So when they come in, we want to see their med list, and we try to figure out how quick can we get them off stuff in a safe way and kind of reverse their issues. So it's good stuff. Sorry, I'm not sure what the 10s are. I did it on my math book, and it's so funny to see how it kind of translates up here. Okay. So one of the key things is when you're thinking about medicine, what I find is the biggest advice that I can tell any of you right now is be your own advocate, and you have to be a big advocate for yourself. If you don't feel like something is right, then it's probably not. And if you pay attention to your body, you know when something's off and when it's not. If you are trying to figure something out and you keep being told that it's normal, but you don't feel right, you need to keep digging. And that can be exhausting and it can be expensive. But at the same time, you know what your body is like and you know what it's supposed to do. And when it doesn't feel right, you have to keep digging. Over the past 2 years, my mom had triple bypass and my dad had a blood cancer. And both times, if I weren't sitting in their room the entire time, I am absolutely convinced neither one of them would be here. And that shouldn't happen, but it does. So it is so, so important that you are an advocate for your own health and you are an advocate for other people's health. It's also very, very important that you start doing some reading on your own, because there's a huge bias in medicine, as in anything, but in medicine it didn't used to feel like this. So huge bias towards pharmaceuticals and testing. You know, we don't get to be the nation with the largest deficit in spending in medicine and still have one of the worst mortality rates. So there's problems, just ask questions, make sure you're asking questions. Know that almost everything we have can be fixed through diet and lifestyle and correcting the problem. One example before I stop, had a gentleman who comes down to see us from Cleveland, and he had 3 stents placed, he was put on 5 different medications, and he said, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not gonna do this. The doctor in Cleveland told me, come down and see you because you do some plant-based thing. So, he came in and he was on a list of things, and he had bad vascular disease. You know, so his blood pressure was up, he's diabetic, he's in his early 50s. And I'm thinking, you're kind of making me a little nervous. I'm going to take you off all your stuff. So what we did is we worked through things together. I gave him options, he chose the options, and then I said, from a realistic standpoint, this is what we can expect. And so the more education we can provide, then people get to make better choices. So if you tell a little kid, don't touch the stove. Don't touch the stove. They're going to touch the stove, right? So it's just like telling a person, don't eat cookies. They're going to eat a cookie because, well, they said that. But if we tell them why, so if you can tell somebody why they should not eat cookies, they can decide for themselves, but knowing the information is going to be a little more helpful. So anyway, we worked with this gentleman. I did for him, put him on a strict plant-based, no-fat diet, because we know that all of the cholesterol we have comes from animals or animal proteins. So that can be shrimp, that can be pork, it can be bison, anything that had eyes in a mother has cholesterol. And this gentleman did not need any more. So the option would be to put him on a plant-based diet and low oil. So here's why we do low oil. Imagine a doorway is like a blood cell. So pretend this whole big room is a muscle cell in your leg, and you want to get up and go for a walk. So in this muscle, you need sugar to run. You need it to operate your muscle. make it work. So before you get up, your leg tells your brain, I'm going to get up and walk, I need some sugar. So your brain will check the sugar situation, so pretend the hallway is filled with a whole bunch of people, pretend they're sugar. And so your brain says, fine, there's plenty. But you go to get up, and your doorway is so globbed up by greasy diner, disgusting, black, greasy yuck, that your doorway can't open. So it gets a little bit open, not much. So the inside of your muscle is saying, hey, I need sugar to run. Like, I'm going to get up and move. I need sugar. And your brain's saying, well, I thought there was enough, but clearly there's not. So I'm going to dump more sugar into the hallway. It's just the door. You know, the door's all globbed up by all this grease. So it's amazing. You put somebody on a plant-based, no-oil diet for 2 weeks, their sugars typically fall between 20 and 40%. So we can literally get people off diabetic medications in an incredibly short period of time. So anyways, he was up for it. So he said, I'll do it. And okay. Lots of counseling on what we were going to do, and he did, and it was amazing. So he came back in, and he called me within 2 weeks, and he was getting dizzy and lightheaded. No surprise. So we stopped his diabetic medication. So when he came back in, his cholesterol, he stopped all of his cholesterol medicines. He was on 3. His cholesterol numbers were the same as when he was on medicine. He no longer had abnormal blood sugars. His highly sensitive CRP, which is a marker of cardiac inflammation and blood vessel inflammation, had dropped 5 points, and that's what we always say the cholesterol medicines help do. His weight, he had lost about 5 pounds. He was on 4 blood pressure medicines when he came, and he's on 2 now. So, you know, we have this guy who feels better than he's ever felt. His cholesterol's doing better. He's no longer diabetic, and his blood pressure is doing better. And we can literally do that over and over and over and over again with so many of the things that we refer to right now as chronic disease. So I don't like to say chronic disease. I like to say the now disease, because we can get them to go away. So that's a little bit, again, it's not herbs and the supplements and stuff, but we can go back to that sometime. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
If you were to recommend a vitamin of some sort, is like a multivitamin sufficient, or if we're looking, should we do extra vitamin D or vitamin C supplement, or one of these with anything?
A good multivitamin is very important. Vitamin D, we rarely find anybody whose vitamin D is normal. And somebody can come in and they can look like leather, and their vitamin D is still not normal. So vitamin D is great. Vitamin C is great for boosting the immune system. If I had to pick 2 things, it would be a multivitamin, a high-dose multivitamin, and a probiotic. 90% of your immune function comes from your gut. 70% of your serotonin receptors from mood are in your gut. And if your gut is not absorbing things, it doesn't matter what you put in you.
Along those lines, how do you know when you're buying supplements that they're good?
Nope. There are some companies that they'll do quality control testing and they'll check them. So Nature's Way has always ranked pretty high. You can get those just about anywhere. In my office, we use a company called Pure because they're gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, preservative-free. But you can, honestly, you can get a lot of good multivitamins. Just do a little bit of research before you buy something.
Oh, like probiotics should be kept in the refrigerator, right?
Unless they're freeze-dried. If they're freeze-dried, they will last. So
Most of them are on the shelf of the
right, most of them are just sitting out there. There's a lot more companies that are putting enough probiotic in their capsules that when you check them at the date of expiration, they have the number that they say they have at the beginning. So probiotics are getting a lot better. You have over 500 different types of bacteria in your gut. So what I would recommend is don't just get a probiotic that has 1 strain. It's not going to do a whole lot. So at least 6 strains.
And with the billion count, I mean, they have everything from 1 to
They
40.
do. Right. Most adults 20 billion.
what happens if your thyroid is the opposite way, it's overactive? What symptoms does that cause?
So that's like dialing it up. So heart racing, diarrhea, hair falling out, can't sleep,
Weight loss?
weight loss. If your thyroid's overactive, too much.
I just have a question, just a fascination more than anything. On your card on the back, IV therapies for hangover.
Yes.
What? Well, okay, I'm glad I'm not doing. So like, you have people in your practice that will go to someone's house because of city do house calls?
We do. So,
Really?
Fascinating.
No, I just think that's interesting.
We do. Let me explain a little bit of that. Okay, so IV nutritional therapy came about from, we have people who come in, their B12 is normal, or excuse me, is really low, but they're not vegan. Like a vegan will have low B12, but anybody else should not have a low B12. Now there's 5 B vitamins and they all hang out together, so we check B12 as a guide. Anyway, if you're not vegan, you should have normal B12. If you don't, that typically tells me you're not absorbing it. If you have an abnormal thyroid, but you don't have an autoimmune thyroid problem, you might be getting it in, but you're not absorbing it. So it kind of gives us a clue who's absorbing, who's not. Now, if somebody is on their just basic screening, shows me that every single level I check is low or not normal, and their diet says, well, I'm eating it, we'll do something called micronutrient testing. Micronutrient testing checks the nutrient, trace mineral, and elements in your neutrophils. And it tells me exactly what you're deficient in across the board. So we can check CoQ10, we can check all your minerals, your different vitamins. When we see somebody who's low, we have to obviously work on fixing the problem, but we can do IV nutrient therapy. We can take what their labs were, we can customize an IV with the exact vitamins and trace elements that they're deficient in, put them in an IV, they sit in one of our little company recliners, read a book, take a snoozy, whatever they want to do, and we give them the nutrients they're missing, and they have 100% absorption. So it gets them loaded back up while we're fixing the problem. So when you look at the two sides of my practice, we have the medical side and we have the fun side. Most of the time on the fun side, people have medical issues, and most of the time on the medical side, people have things they don't like either. We do a lot of wedding parties, so hence the hangover IVs. We'll do post-bachelor party group little sessions where they come in and they feel awful because they did stuff they're not allowed to talk about. And so they come in and we give them lots of fluids and we give them some headache medicine, some nausea medicine, and then they're back to the world of the living.
Is low B12 or thyroid, whether it's overactive or underactive, is that hereditary?
There are a lot of people who have like Hashimoto's and autoimmune thyroid in their family. Those oftentimes we can make that actually go away. So we know that there's a hereditary predisposition, but there's things that are turning that on and turning it off. So what we like to do is, the incidence of Hashimoto's is 35% higher than it was 20 years ago. That doesn't tell me that we're like this big inbreeding community. It just lets us know that there is something going on that's getting these things turned on, and so we figure out how to turn them off. Yeah,
Do you have an opinion about medical marijuana?
I do.
And it is.
It's very controversial right now. I think that in our current environment, there's a whole lot of risk involved by people inappropriately using marijuana. I also know that I have patients who have, I'm a sucker for kids and I see a lot of kids, so I have parents who have children who have cerebral palsy or post-infectious encephalitis who have nonstop seizures all day long. And the oil from medical marijuana takes them all away, and they're off their medicine. So,
What about migraines?
so migraine, we focus a lot on food sensitivities because we know they're huge triggers. So there's some specialty labs I work with that will draw blood, send it off, and they'll measure 500 different things, like raw versus cooked foods and preservatives, and that's a huge starting point. We also know there's a lot of things that are very inflammatory in our typical diet, so if we pull those out and find out a lot of the triggers, we can do some really neat things. There are a lot of herbs and supplements that we use. Magnesium is wonderful, magnesium and calcium for migraine headaches. But a lot of times it's fixing the triggers and then causing the blood vessels to act normally and not vasodilating. Anything else? Great, well, thank you all. What, sorry? Yeah, so there's all this controversy over fish oil and omegas. We know that the omegas are very anti-inflammatory, and I think a lot of different studies get bogged down and they measure one thing and they say, oh, it's not like the panacea of all cures for one thing, and so suddenly fish oil is not good anymore. Fish oil is incredibly helpful. 3 and 6, wonderfully anti-inflammatory. We have some inflammatory markers we'll check in people who seem like their arthritis is way out of proportion to what it should be, or their heart disease is. And if we can get the inflammation out of their system, and that's a key component of it, we see everything calm down. It's great for dry eyes, it's great for joints, so a lot of omegas.